to meet you.
Great to meet you as well.
And so this is Shea Metcalf, who is one of my research assistants. I think one of the central insights from your book is the demographic differences between families in red states and blue states. Could you talk about that a little bit?
What you have that has accelerated since we wrote the book is migration. When you look at the folks who move to the coasts, who move to North Carolina, to the Research Triangle, the more economically dynamic areas of the country, they're buying into what we call blue. That is, a set of ideas of family formation that involved later age of marriage and first birth, use of contraception at the point where you become sexually active, holding off on having the child until you're ready financially and in terms of the right partner, and then managing in a way that involves hyperinvestment in children. And when you look at the people who stayed behind in more working class or rural, but sometimes simply the folks who went to college and then stayed in the area, they're marrying at younger ages. They're more likely to be with somebody because they had the child. They're having more children compared to folks in New York City, and they have a more traditional lifestyle that is more likely to either focus on churches if they're well off, or extended families if they're not so well off.
So one of the things I actually really appreciated most about your book was that it described the way red families describe their values and blue families describe their values.
We struggled not to be judgmental in the book and to try to tie the different family formation strategies to the needs of a new economy. And so as the new industrial economy, the new information economy, requires people with college education to get the best jobs, it makes sense to have your children after your college education.
I think the piece we missed is the way in which what red means for religious conservatives on college campuses has been both profound and a reinterpretation of what religious values means. And for red college graduates, the emphasis on virginity, for example, I didn't know when we wrote the book that there's people describing themselves as virgins who have had sex but are now committed to chastity until they find the right person. And that much of what, and that not much of, but an important component of Christian groups on campus has been to provide safe spaces where there is not the expectation that the moment you start flirting with somebody, you're going to end up in bed together.
So, in the blue family structure, they wait until they're more stable before they have a family. But a lot of blue families are poor. And so what do you do if you're a poor blue family without access to education?
Some of what we were calling blue was simply the new upper middle class system of morality. And we felt both the red and blue upper middle class systems left out the working class. There is no class translation that works for either red or blue. So what you see with red in more traditional areas of the country, as I said, you don't get quite the same embrace of religion in working class communities. They're on the edge. They've become less likely to go to church, but those who go to church do pretty well. The people who go to church once a week or more and marry somebody in the same church, and they both go together, have really strong families. If the guy loses his job and he hangs on, he goes to church, the church provides a network that will help him get another job. If his response to being laid off is depression, drinking, domestic violence, all of which increase with layoffs, and he stops going to church, that family is likely to fall apart.
What, I guess, are your thoughts on culture wars of today?
That certainly relates today to the anxiety of the people who voted, the class anxiety, class and race anxiety of the people who voted for Trump. So it certainly relates to that. And it also relates to the differences in family structure with which we began this interview. The rate of marriage, the only group for whom the rate of marriage has gone up is women at the top of the income spectrum. And so marriage rates are profoundly correlated with income.
So back to the economy and how it's changed a little bit. Um, your book mentions some legislation that you think might help the new, I guess, the new way that people have to go to work and have the dual incomes. And I mean, one of them that comes to mind was the change in the times of the school. But what are some other things that you would propose that would help this shifting economy and help both red and blue families cope with it?
We'd like to see a jobs guarantee. If you deliver a meaningful place in the community, that everyone has something they're able to work on that provides family support. But I think you also have to have a society where, the person who works 60 hours a week isn't paid 3 times as much as somebody who works 40 hours a week. To get to the point, I did quote a New York Times article about the greedy workplace.
Right. Right.
So I think that's of a piece. If you have more equal communities, you tend to see more support for things like healthcare for everybody, childcare for everybody, preschool as something that ought to be available for everyone. If you have people in their gated communities and fortresses, they don't want to pay for people they see as lazy bums.
You see just like such a divergence in the legislation of red states and blue states over time. Like, is the answer like, cede federal control over these things because we're never going to agree, and you just, vote with your feet by moving somewhere where you like the laws and just give up on agreeing on stuff?
I think we've noticed, or we've helped to push people who are on the opposite side of us on some issues to look at the more fundamental issues of economics. And if you move away from abortion, for example, and you move towards economic policy, then you can develop more of a consensus. I mean, there were some headlines that the president and the Democrats could agree on pumping up money for the infrastructure of the United States. So if you, of course, that fell apart, but the idea is that if you focus on issues that affect people's pocketbook, it's not always going to work, but it's at least a way of trying to build some consensus.